The South China Sea was completely calm. The sun was already leaning toward the west. A reddish glow tinged the sky. Everything seemed normal, but no one knew that this evening was about to become history. But before we begin, make sure to subscribe to our channel and leave your like. Now, let's get started. Theme 1, the advancement of military technology and the new arms race of the 21st century. The growing tension between global powers in the 21st century no longer takes place through direct confrontations on traditional battlefields, but through technological demonstrations, digital espionage, and strategic advances in military equipment. The fictional episode involving the United States F-35B fighter jet and a sophisticated Chinese radar system is, in fact, a symbolic portrayal of the new modern warfare landscape. Although imaginary, the text reflects real themes shaping the balance of power among nations. The F-35B, a fifth-generation multifunctional jet, represents the forefront of Western military technology. Invisible to conventional radars, capable of vertical takeoff and supersonic speed, this aircraft is an emblem of American technological supremacy. Its presence in foreign airspace carries a clear message. Even without declaring war, it is possible to impose fear and influence. However, the downing of the aircraft in the story forces us to consider a current paradox. To what extent is technological superiority truly invulnerable? China, meanwhile, appears as a rising power by acquiring and improving technologies originally sold by the U.S., something that has happened in real life with various systems. The country transforms a scenario of dependency into an advantageous position. The fact that it shoots down an F-35B using advanced detection systems ironically sold by the Americans themselves is a warning beyond fiction. It shows how technological cooperation, if not accompanied by careful diplomatic strategy, can backfire on its initiator. This phenomenon reveals a worrying reality. We are living through a new arms race, now focused on who can see better, predict more accurately, and act faster. Autonomous drones, hypersonic weapons, real-time surveillance satellites, and artificial intelligence systems are the new protagonists of a conflict that takes place both in the air and cyberspace. The logic of war has changed. The battlefield is invisible and silent, but lethal. Another important point of reflection is the role of information and its manipulation. In the story, news of the fighter jet's downing was briefly released and then taken down by major media outlets. This fictional element mirrors real practices where governments influence or censor coverage of incidents that could tarnish their image before the world. In an era where informational warfare is almost as important as military warfare, controlling the narrative can be the difference between winning and losing the war for public opinion. Moreover, the text symbolizes a paradigm shift. It's no longer enough to have the most powerful weapons. One must know how to use them strategically and be prepared for other nations to also have access to the same technology, legally or illegally. Absolute military supremacy is increasingly rare. Today, small advances in sensors, tracking software, and computational intelligence can neutralize billions of dollars worth of weaponry. This modern Cold War also brings ethical implications. Who regulates the use of autonomous weapons? How to prevent AI systems from making lethal mistakes? The relentless pursuit of technological superiority can overlook moral reflection. War becomes a data equation, no longer a human decision based on prudence or diplomacy. In the end, the lesson emerging from the story is clear. Technology, no matter how advanced, is never completely safe in human hands. Global balance depends not only on armaments, but on wisdom, ethics, and constant vigilance. The story of the downed F-35B is not just a fictional narrative, it is a disturbing mirror of what is already underway. And perhaps the greatest risk is not the confrontation itself, but the arrogance of believing one cannot be defeated. Theme 2, the invisibility of war, secret strategies, and the silent game of superpowers. In today's world, wars are no longer fought just with tanks, troops, and territorial occupations. They have become invisible, both physically and symbolically. The fictional narrative of the F-35B flying over the South China Sea and being shot down by an adapted radar system is a powerful representation of this new form of war, a silent, secret, and often imperceptible battle to the common public eye. The text highlights how the conflict between powerful nations has ceased to be declared and now occurs behind the scenes of military technology and intelligence. A plane that cannot be seen by the naked eye or detected by radar crossing enemy airspace with total autonomy is more than a show of force. It is a symbolic act. It is a political provocation, a display of power, a wordless invasion. Yet what truly draws attention is China's silent reaction, observing, analyzing, and then responding precisely, without fanfare but with firmness. This new form of conflict demands constant preparation, absolute vigilance, and above all, discretion. Superpowers know they cannot engage in open wars directly because the cost would be immense, both in lives and international image. Thus, they operate in the shadows, espionage, cyber infiltration, carefully calculated tactical demonstrations, and armaments invisible to the public. The true conflict lies in each nation's ability to show it can see what others believe to be hidden. The fictional episode is loaded with meaning. When the Chinese radar detects the F-35B, the moment is not only technical, but strategic. Detection represents the breaking of the invisibility illusion. What should have been undetectable was tracked. What should have been invincible was vulnerable. And most symbolically, it was shot down with technology developed from systems bought years before from the very United States. It's as if China is saying, you gave us the tools, we turned them into weapons. This historical irony reinforces a key point: the risk of underestimating the other. For decades, the West saw China as a promising market and an emerging power, but still far from US military sophistication. Time passed, and that view became outdated. China not only kept pace, but internalized knowledge and improved it, creating hybrid solutions between what it bought and what it developed locally. The downing of the F-35B is, in this sense, a metaphor for technological revenge. Another fascinating element in the text is how the incident is treated by the international press. According to the narrative, the news was briefly published but quickly taken down. This media manipulation shows that modern war does not happen only in the sky, but also in information. The battle for truth and narrative has become as vital as air dominance. Whoever controls the version of events controls public perception, international support, and even diplomatic directions. This control of information creates a paradox. We live in the era of hyperconnectivity, but know less and less about real conflicts. Great powers hide their failures and amplify their victories. The clashes are not televised, they are concealed. It is the era of invisible war, not only to radars, but also to the eyes and ears of the global population. The story of the F-35B also forces us to think about the limits of technology. No matter how advanced systems are, they still depend on human decisions, which often rely on short-term political, ideological, or strategic judgments. Blind trust in technology can be dangerous. In the text, the American fighter jet returns to Chinese airspace with more boldness, believing that since nothing happened before, nothing will happen now. This kind of confidence has a cost, and the result was a supersonic missile turning the world's most modern jet into wreckage. Ultimately, the story proposes a deep reflection on the current state of international relations. War is happening, but without our knowledge. It's in the skies, undersea cables, satellites, military software source codes. Conflicts no longer wait for formal declarations. They are initiated by drones, digital espionage, invisible aircraft. It's a shadow game where every move must be precisely calculated, as any mistake can lead to catastrophic consequences. Invisibility, both physical and symbolic, has become the main weapon of global powers. What cannot be seen cannot be stopped. Theme 3: Reverse Engineering and the Rebalancing of Power. When the copy surpasses the original, the 21st century witnesses a phenomenon that challenges the foundations of traditional geopolitical dominance: the strategic use of reverse engineering as an instrument of power. The story of the F-35B being shot down by the Chinese using technology originally acquired from the United States represents a symbolic inversion of power relations between creators and copiers. More than fiction, this situation reveals a real and growing trend: the rebalancing of forces through the appropriation, modification, and improvement of foreign technologies. Technology, by definition, is not neutral. When one country sells sophisticated equipment to another, it opens a door to more than mere cooperation. It allows access to its strategic thinking, system logic, and secret architecture. China, over the past decades, has been extensively supplied with Western resources in several areas. But unlike many expected, it didn't just use these resources, it reinvented them. And as the text suggests, it used this knowledge to neutralize one of the most powerful symbols of U.S. air superiority. This kind of appropriation is called reverse engineering, the process by which equipment is dismantled, analyzed, and understood to be replicated or improved. In military context, this practice is not new. What has changed is the scale and sophistication with which it is now carried out. Today, countries like China, Iran, and even North Korea use reverse engineering not just for independence, but as a strategic weapon to overturn previously unfavorable scenarios. The fictional case of the F-35B brings a crucial detail. China had acquired radars and sensors from the United States during a period of milder diplomatic relations. However, the country did not remain a mere consumer. It invested in science, technical training, and national engineering. What was once an imported product became raw material for innovation. The radar that once could not detect the American fighter became capable of tracking it precisely, and more importantly, it proved sufficient to bring it down. This technological turnaround also symbolizes a mindset shift. Western superiority long rested on the belief that technical knowledge was unreachable by so-called emerging countries. However, this view ignored the adaptation potential and rapid development pace of these nations. China, with its combination of state investment, technological espionage, and scientific training, managed in 3 decades what took other powers a century to accomplish. The text also leads us to reflect on the irony of the arms globalization. By selling sensitive technology in exchange for trade deals or geopolitical influence, leading nations create their own competitors. The thorn that pierced the F-35B was forged with American metal. It's a powerful metaphor. What was built to provide advantage ends up creating vulnerability. Moreover, there is an ethical dimension in this story. To what extent is it fair or acceptable to use someone else's knowledge for military purposes? The boundary between innovation and copying, inspiration and espionage, learning and sabotage becomes increasingly thin. In modern warfare, whoever masters reverse engineering also masters the logic of the contest. Copyright loses strength before strategic necessity. The symbolic value of authorship is replaced by practical effectiveness. The narrative of the downed F-35B also carries a strategic warning. It's not enough to be the first to invent. One must maintain the lead. The speed of innovation must be constant. After all, technology that is a secret today may be standard tomorrow, and if the adversary reproduces it more efficiently and deploys it first, the game changes. Ultimately, the story symbolizes a new kind of international balance, one based on shared technical intelligence, even if indirectly. The idea of producer centers and consumer peripheries no longer holds. Today, any nation with access to technology and resources can turn foreign knowledge into its own tool, and more, it can surpass it. The story of the downed F-35B, therefore, goes beyond a narrative of action or espionage. It represents a symbolic landmark of the new 21st century warfare reality, a world where the copy can be as powerful as the invention, and often even more lethal. Theme 4, the end of invisible superiority. How the technological war is redefining the notion of air dominance. For decades, the United States dominated global airspace with its state-of-the-art fighters, stealth technology, and long-range strike capability. The F-35B, the protagonist of the story about the incident in the South China Sea, symbolizes this absolute dominance. Invisible to radars, fast, lethal, and multifunctional, it represents the pinnacle of military aviation. However, when it is shot down by a system developed based on technology sold by the US itself, the world silently witnesses the beginning of the end of unilateral air superiority. The text precisely shows the moment this superiority is challenged. The F-35B enters Chinese airspace undetected initially, completes its reconnaissance successfully, and withdraws. But on the second incursion, the scenario changes completely. It is tracked, locked, pursued, and destroyed. This turnaround is not only a technical change, but a symbolic transformation. What was once unthinkable, a stealth fighter being shot down, becomes reality. The implicit message is clear: no one is untouchable, no matter how advanced their technology. This paradigm shift has profound implications for global security. Stealth technology based on hiding electromagnetic, thermal, and visual signals has always been a strategic trump card. It guaranteed that the US could intervene anywhere in the world unnoticed, causing psychological and military impact. By showing that such technology can be overcome, the text questions the very essence of invisible superiority. It is no longer enough to be undetectable. One must consider consider that the enemy also evolves. In this scenario, China emerges not only as a rising power, but as the protagonist of a new technological era. By enhancing detection systems acquired in the past, it shows it is not just reacting but creating. The use of thermal sensors, tracking algorithms, and artificial intelligence to identify invisible flight patterns reveals a level of sophistication that many still ignore. This redefines the power balance in the airspace, stripping the US of the monopoly on invisibility. The fall of the F-35B also generates a change in international security doctrine. The notion that superpowers could operate with impunity in conflict zones or disputed regions weakens. Smaller countries with access to advanced detection technology gain real deterrence power. A single well-calibrated system can neutralize billions in military investments. This rebalances the modern war equation and turns the airspace, once exclusive to superpowers, into a more democratic battleground. Another interesting point in the text is the absence of direct confrontation. The fighter was not attacked by another aircraft or squadron. It was destroyed from a distance by a guided missile powered by sensors and automated calculations. This form of combat, increasingly common, distances humans from the battlefield. War becomes an equation, an algorithm. This changes everything, from pilot training to political decision-making. When pressing a button replaces physical confrontation, ethical criteria also change. Invisibility, once an absolute advantage, now becomes a dangerous illusion. When the enemy learns to see the invisible, the entire logic of war changes. The F-35B represents a kind of technological arrogance, trusting too much in the idea that being undetectable means being invincible. The story shows this is no longer true. Detection was not accidental, but a deliberate improvement. The response was immediate, precise, and fatal. This fictional episode also reveals the impact of technology on building narrative power. The news of the fighter's fall, according to the text, was released and soon taken down. This control of the narrative shows that beyond physical destruction, there is a war of versions. No country wants to seem vulnerable, but the truth, even if hidden, reverberates. And strategists worldwide take note. Air dominance, once uncontested, is now fought over at every bite, sensor, and radar. Finally, the text offers a silent geopolitical lesson. True power lies not only in having the most advanced weapon, but in anticipating the adversary's evolution. By detecting and shooting down the F-35B, China demonstrates that superiority is always temporary. In a world where technology evolves daily, staying ahead requires more than innovation. It demands constant vigilance, strategic humility, and the ability to see beyond what is believed invisible. Theme 5. Between Spies and Algorithms, the New Face of War and the Rise of Global Surveillance. The narrative of the F-35B fighter flying over Chinese territory and being shot down mid-flight might seem like war fiction, but at its core, it depicts an increasingly present reality, the transformation of modern war into a silent conflict guided by data, espionage, and surveillance. No longer are spies with false identities and microfilms hidden in cigarettes dominating international politics backstage. Now, drones, satellites, supercomputers, and radars capable of reading the heat of a turbine thousands of meters away take that role. War no longer needs bullets to start just an unauthorized radio signal, an unusual thermal change, or a shadow detected by algorithms. The story clearly presents this new panorama. China, upon detecting an unusual radar point, begins an automated investigation process. There are no shouts or rushes. There are attentive operators, active sensors, and real-time detection systems. The action does not start with missiles, but with tracking. Technology is the true protagonist. When the American fighter reappears, bolder, the response is not emotional but calculated. The radar locks the target and the machine does the rest. It's a portrait of a war where the human factor is increasingly secondary. This paradigm shift is profound. In the past, winning a war depended on the soldier's courage, the general's strategy, and the country's industrial capacity. Today, it depends on sensor performance, algorithm efficiency, and the skill to interpret signals. War shifts from physical to digital, from battlefield to laboratory, from trench to data center. Military power, in this context, is a direct function of surveillance capacity. The fictional episode also illustrates how surveillance is both defensive and offensive. Flying over Chinese military installations undetected by the naked eye, the F-35B acted like a flying camera, collecting images, mapping structures, identifying vulnerabilities. It was essentially an espionage mission. No shots fired, but a violation occurred. No confrontation, but intrusion. This type of action reaction is typical of contemporary wars, where peace and conflict boundaries dissolve. The war has begun, but no one announced it. China's response using a heat-guided missile to neutralize the fighter is also symbolic. It shows surveillance is no longer passive. Radar no longer just sees, it decides. The machine not only identifies, it interprets, reacts, and shoots. This brings up a crucial point: war automation. The more we depend on intelligent systems, the further we move from direct control over events. The decision to shoot, once made by a commander, may now be initiated by software processing data in seconds. Reaction speed surpasses human reflection. This technological reality also raises a fundamental ethical question: who is responsible for lethal actions decided by machines? If the system errs, who answers? The engineer who programmed it, the officer who activated it, the politician who authorized it? Automation does not eliminate responsibility, it diffuses it, making it harder to track. This is dangerous. Silent war can become a war without culprits. The text also reinforces an important aspect of today's geopolitics: narrative control. The news of the fighter's shootdown was briefly released and then disappeared. This media silence reflects an image-preserving strategy. No superpower wants to appear vulnerable, but silence is also revealing. What is not said often matters most. In informational warfare times, hiding is a way to fight. The absence of news is, in itself, a message. Finally, the story invites reflection on the escalating global surveillance power. In the name of security, we are building a planet where everything is observed, and, consequently, everything can be attacked. The line between protection and aggression grows thinner. War, in this new context, no longer needs declaration. It just happens. Invisible, automated, silent. And when we realize it, we are already in the middle of it. Theme 6: the impact of the technological revolution on contemporary military strategies. The narrative about the F-35B shot down in the South China Sea is not just a story about a specific conflict. It reveals profoundly the transformations that the technological revolution has imposed on modern military strategies. What was once a physical dispute based on brute force has now become a complex game of intelligence, reaction speed, and constant innovation. Contemporary war is no longer just between armies, but between technological systems, algorithms, and digital infrastructure. In the past century, military power was mainly measured by the number of soldiers, tanks, and airplanes. Today, the ability to detect, identify, track, and neutralize threats before they can act defines strategic advantage. The example of the F-35B, considered the world's most advanced fighter yet still shot down, symbolizes this fundamental change. Superiority is no longer about having the most expensive equipment, but the most effective defense system, capable of disarming the enemy quickly and precisely. China in the story is shown as a country that invested heavily in defense technology, not just by buying foreign equipment, but dedicating significant resources to developing artificial intelligence, thermal sensors, and advanced radars that can surpass stealth. The technological invisibility of next-gen fighters. This technological bet made it possible, contrary to expectations, for the F-35B to be detected and shot down. This evidences that the war game has changed. Reaction time and data processing capacity have become crucial. Moreover, the conflict shows how surveillance and attack technologies are increasingly integrated. Radar no longer serves just to detect, but also to direct the missile that neutralizes the threat. This integration is possible thanks to advances in sensors, real-time data processing, and automated command and control systems. The result is a fast and efficient cycle in which the threat is identified and eliminated within seconds before it can cause damage. Another important point is the role of past diplomatic and commercial relations for technological advancement. China, by acquiring advanced systems from the U.S. during a more amicable period, gained know-how later used to create its own defense system. This shows how commercial agreements can have unexpected strategic consequences. Selling military technology can become a risk as it may strengthen future adversaries. This situation raises questions about the need for stricter controls on technology transfers, especially in sensitive sectors like defense. Globalization brought economic and political advantages, but also facilitated the spread of strategic knowledge. For countries leading in military technology, balancing international trade with protecting secrets and competitive advantages is an ongoing challenge. Furthermore, the text reminds us that modern war is characterized by a dynamic balance between offense and defense. Innovation in offensive systems like the F-35B is quickly followed by advances in defensive systems such as radars and supersonic missiles. missiles. This technological race is relentless and defines 21st century military strategies. It is no longer just about destroying the enemy, but neutralizing their capabilities before they have a chance to act. Finally, the episode highlights the importance of airspace dominance for national security and power projection. The ability to operate invisible fighters, conduct reconnaissance, and carry out precise strikes is fundamental for any global power. Losing an aircraft like the F-35B, even in an isolated incident, is a symbolic blow to aerial supremacy, but it also shows that this supremacy is vulnerable and requires constant updates. In summary, the story of the F-35B in the South China Sea is a metaphor for the profound changes brought by the technological revolution to military strategies. It illustrates how war has ceased to be merely a matter of physical strength to become a fast, complex dispute between technological systems, intelligence, and continuous innovation. It reveals that in the contemporary world, whoever controls technology controls war. Theme 7. The strategic importance of the South China Sea in international relations. The South China Sea, the setting of the incident involving the F-35B fighter jet, is one of the most sensitive and strategic geopolitical regions on the planet. Its importance goes beyond the military conflict narrated in the text and reflects the complexity of contemporary international relations, where economic, military, and political interests intertwine intricately. Understanding this region is fundamental to grasping the global landscape of tensions and power disputes. Geographically, the South China Sea is a vast stretch of water connecting important international maritime routes. Approximately 1/3 of global maritime trade passes through these waters, including about 30% of the world's oil trade. This makes the sea a vital artery for the global economy, especially for Asian countries highly dependent on energy and raw material imports. Any instability in the region can trigger global economic consequences. Beyond its economic relevance, the South China Sea is rich in natural resources, including vast reserves of oil, natural gas, and fisheries. The exploitation of these resources is a major point of dispute among countries in the region, such as China, Vietnam, the Philippines, Malaysia, Brunei, and Taiwan. Each nation claims parts of the territory, leading to a tense and conflict-prone scenario. Politically, China claims most of the South China Sea through the so-called 9-dash line, which covers about 90% of the maritime area. This claim is contested by several neighboring countries and not internationally recognized, especially in rulings by the Permanent Court of Arbitration. This territorial dispute generates constant diplomatic and military tension, with frequent naval patrols, military exercises, and China's construction of artificial islands to reinforce its presence. The F-35B episode, inserted in this context, reveals the strategic importance of controlling and monitoring this area. For the United States, guaranteeing freedom of navigation and maintaining a constant military presence is essential to counterbalance Chinese influence. The fighter's overflight described in the text is an example of power demonstration and surveillance, a way of signaling that the U.S. does not accept Chinese hegemony in the region. On the other hand, for China, defending the South China Sea is a matter of national sovereignty and strategic security. The U.S. military presence near its coasts is seen as a direct threat, justifying investment in advanced defense technologies, such as the radar system capable of detecting and shooting down the F-35B. This dynamic generates a cycle of action and reaction that increases the risk of accidental conflicts and military escalation. Besides the military dispute, the South China Sea is also a stage for broader economic and political rivalries. The region is a focal point in the competition among global powers for control over production chains, investments, and geopolitical influence. Projects like China's Belt and Road Initiative include strengthening port and naval infrastructure in the region, consolidating China's role as a dominant actor. Internationally, the South China Sea issue mobilizes multilateral organizations and provokes debates on international law, freedom of navigation, and peaceful conflict resolution. The absence of a global agreement that respects all claims makes the situation delicate, with a constant risk of confrontations between military forces of different countries. The fictional F-35B incident, therefore, is a microcosm of the real tensions permeating the South China Sea. It exemplifies how the region is a space where cutting-edge military technology, diplomacy, and power games intersect in a complex way. Stability or instability in this area has a direct impact on global peace and security. In summary, the South China Sea is not just a point on the map, it is a strategic stage where interests involving security, economy, politics, and technology are contested. Understanding its nuances is essential to grasping contemporary challenges in international geopolitics and the complex interaction between states in an increasingly interdependent and multipolar world. Theme 8: Military Technology and the Race for Air Supremacy in the 21st Century. The episode involving the F-35B fighter jet and its shootdown in the South China Sea highlights the growing importance of military technology in the quest for air supremacy in the 21st century. In a world increasingly dependent on technological innovation, the arms race is not only about quantity, but mainly about quality, adaptability, and integration of defense and attack systems. Dominance of the skies remains a decisive factor for global power projection, and the evolution of stealth fighters, radars, and supersonic missiles clearly demonstrates this. The F-35B, protagonist of the text, is a clear example of this technological revolution. Developed by the United States, it is considered the most advanced fighter in the world, with stealth capabilities that make it practically invisible to conventional radars, in addition to impressive firepower and the unique ability to take off and land vertically. This combination of features symbolizes the forefront of military aviation and represents a qualitative leap compared to previous generations of combat aircraft. However, the incident in the South China Sea shows that no technology is absolutely unbeatable. Despite the stealth capability of the F-35B, it was detected and shot down thanks to an enhanced Chinese radar system based on technology initially acquired from the United States. This fact reveals that technological innovation is a dynamic and continuous process, where supremacy can be temporary, and defenses are constantly challenged by new solutions. China's ability to improve previously purchased systems and use them to shoot down a stealth fighter demonstrates the importance of autonomous research and development. Countries investing in science and technology can, over time, surpass their original suppliers and create more effective weapons. This creates a scenario where technology transfer can be a double-edged sword, leading to strategic advantage losses for the selling countries. Furthermore, the race for air supremacy in the 21st century is not just a dispute between fighters and radars. It involves a range of integrated technologies such as artificial intelligence for real-time data analysis, secure communication systems, electronic warfare to interfere with enemy sensors, and hypersonic missiles capable of striking targets at extremely high speeds. This complexity turns military aviation into a multidimensional battlefield. Another important aspect is the rapid pace at which these technologies evolve. The F-35B, which is currently the most advanced fighter, can be surpassed within a few years by new projects from other powers. This speed of innovation requires countries to maintain constant investments and update their fleets and defense systems to avoid vulnerabilities. Technological stagnation can mean losing control of airspace and, consequently, national security itself. The episode also highlights the role of surveillance and reconnaissance in modern warfare. The F-35B was not only deployed to attack, but also to gather intelligence on Chinese bases, which is essential for strategic planning. Air supremacy therefore involves not only firepower, but also the ability to monitor the enemy and anticipate its moves. Beyond the military sphere, this technological race impacts the industry and economy of the involved countries. The development of advanced fighters moves billions of dollars and generates highly qualified jobs. Dependence on imported technologies, in turn, can be a vulnerable point, leading countries to invest in technological autonomy as a security strategy. Finally, the incident of the downed F-35B shows that air supremacy is a technological chess game, where each move is followed by rapid and unexpected responses. National security in the 21st century depends on a combination of innovation, adaptation, and constant vigilance. In an increasingly complex global scenario, whoever controls technology will dominate the skies and possibly the future of international relations. Theme 9: The dynamics of electronic warfare and defense against stealth technologies. The account of the F-35B fighter jet being shot down in the South China Sea highlights a fundamental aspect of modern wars: electronic warfare and defense against stealth technologies. With the advancement of aircraft invisible to conventional radars, the ability to detect and neutralize these assets increasingly depends on the development of sophisticated electronic systems. War has ceased to be merely physical and has come to be fought in the invisible field of electromagnetic waves, sensors, and digital signals. Stealth aircraft, such as the F-35B, are designed to avoid detection using specific aerodynamic shapes and materials that absorb radar waves. This makes it difficult for traditional systems systems to identify their presence, granting a significant tactical advantage to their operators. However, this invisibility is not absolute. The text shows that with appropriate technologies, such as advanced high-sensitivity radars and thermal sensors, it is possible to see stealth aircraft and act to neutralize them. Electronic warfare is therefore an essential field of modern defense. It involves the use of equipment to interfere with, block, or deceive enemy electronic systems, as well as protecting one's own systems against such interference. In the narrated case, China used systems previously acquired from the United States, which were enhanced to detect the stealth fighter and guide it to destruction by a supersonic missile. This improvement demonstrates that technology can be evolved and adapted to overcome barriers once thought insurmountable. Moreover, electronic warfare also includes the ability to destabilize enemy communications, confuse their sensors, and render their weapons ineffective. The F-35B pilot tried to use tactics to evade the missile, such as changing course and increasing speed, as well as attempting to interfere with the tracking radar. This shows that electronic warfare is a constant battle of countermeasures and rapid responses, where operator intelligence and electronic system efficiency determine mission success or failure. Another important aspect is the integration of electronic systems with advanced weaponry, such as infrared or radar-guided missiles that can precisely pursue targets. In the text, the missile launched was able to follow the hot gases from the jet's turbine, an example of the use of thermal sensors to track the enemy. This combination of electronic warfare and smart weaponry is a defining characteristic of current conflicts. The development and protection of electronic technologies is also a strategic sovereignty issue. Countries dependent on foreign equipment are vulnerable to failures, espionage, or restrictions imposed by suppliers. China, by improving systems bought from the US, demonstrates the importance of technological autonomy and innovation capacity to ensure national security. Finally, the episode shows that air supremacy in the 21st century depends not only on physical strength or firepower, but on the ability to dominate the electronic space. Electronic warfare is a critical arena where the balance of power can be decided before any bullet is fired. Control of the electromagnetic spectrum and constant innovation in detection and defense techniques define the new face of modern war. Thank you very much for watching the video. If you enjoyed our content, please subscribe to our channel and leave a like. Also, check out other interesting content that's appearing on your screen right now, and I'll see you in the next video. See you next time.